Okay, this is an article from the Associated Press, June 18th, 2019. Newtown parents score a win in growing fight against hoaxers. The father of a victim of the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre has won a defamation lawsuit against the authors of a book that claimed the shooting never happened. The latest victory for victims' relatives who have been taking a more aggressive stance against conspiracy theorists. The book Nobody Died at Sandy Hook has also been pulled from shelves to settle claims against its publisher filed by Lenny Posner, whose 6-year-old son Noah was killed in the shooting. My face-to-face interactions with Mr. Posner have led me to believe that Mr. Posner is telling the truth about the death of his son. Dave Gahary, the principal officer at publisher Moonrock Books, said Monday, "I extend my most heartfelt and sincere apology to the Posner family." A Wisconsin judge issued a summary judgment Monday against authors James Fetzer and Mike Palachuk, a ruling that was separate from the settlement between Posner and the book's publisher. A trial to decide damages has been set for October. Posner has been pushing back for years against hoaxers who have harassed him, subjected him to death threats, and claimed that he was an actor and his son never existed. He has spent years getting Facebook and others to remove conspiracy videos and set up a website to debunk conspiracy theories. Lately, the fight has been joined by others who lost relatives in the December 14th, 2012 school shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. After quietly enduring harassment and ridiculous assertions for years, some have changed their approach, deciding the only way to stop it is to confront it. Their efforts have turned the tables on the hoaxers, including Alex Jones, host of the conspiracy-driven InfoWars website. Now, the first thing that I want to point out here is the language. Their efforts have turned the tables on the hoaxers. This is similar to the way that controlled opposition has been formulated in the vaccination quote-unquote debate, where they are referred to by the media as anti-vaxxers. And then that term is attached with an energetic stigma of negativity in the minds of those who don't know what to think, for lack of a better way to describe their state of being. They are uninterested or unaware of the nuance of what's taking place here. And that is the primary target audience for language like this, the hoaxers. Even the way that I say it implies that negative intent because I'm viewing it through the lens of knowing what's going on here, and I can see the way that they are painting the language with the brush of toxic energy. Their efforts have turned the tables on the hoaxers, including Alex Jones. And this, of course, is illustrative of the entire purpose for the creation of the Alex Jones character, which was to eventually morph into this caricature of what a conspiracy theorist represents and acts like. Alex Jones serves the purpose of being the example that is pointed to whenever the topic of conspiracy theories is brought up in the media, as a way, of course, to discredit them immediately. You don't even have to go into any sort of detail, regardless of what the subject is. This is the guy who said they are churning the frogs gay. They don't have to do anything more than that, given the plethora of sound bites that the Alex Jones character has provided over the years. And in legal proceedings of various lawsuits, his attorneys have allowed him to admit that he is playing a character. This is for entertainment purposes. When they were actually under oath, they let the beans spill about what his character is actually designed to be and function as, which is a character no different than anyone in the WWF, or WWE as it is more recently known. And indeed, this is why someone like Jesse Ventura could so seamlessly move from the world of wrestling to the world of politics and then to the world of conspiracy theorist. He did it all. And even President Trump was featured in WrestleMania promos here and there. I mean, he was even involved in some of the scripting with Vince McMahon at WrestleMania. Victims' families scored another victory Tuesday when a Connecticut judge imposed sanctions on Jones for an outburst on his web show against one of the family's lawyers. Judge Barbara Bellis on Tuesday ordered the InfoWars host to pay some of the relatives' legal fees and prohibited him from filing motions to dismiss their defamation lawsuit against him. The families of several of the 20 children and 6 educators killed in the 2012 shooting are suing Jones, InfoWars, and others for promoting the hoax theory. Jones made angry comments on his show Friday about a lawyer for the families, accusing him of trying to frame him by planting child pornography in documents Jones' attorney submitted to the family's lawyers. And, you know, it's funny, even in the X-Files movie, they made it known that this was how they discredit someone who might have the truth, right? They go into their residence and they frame them with child pornography on their computer, and there's no coming back from that. And that was explained to Mulder in one of the pivotal scenes as far as what was really going on. And then you have, again, the character Alex Jones co-opting that sort of behavior, injecting his character into the idea of planting something on someone's computer, or just in general interference from some nefarious source against an alleged conspiracy theorist or truth teller, as it were. Robbie Parker, whose 6-year-old daughter Emily was among those killed at Sandy Hook, spent years ignoring people who called him a crisis actor. His family moved to the West Coast, but still the harassment didn't stop. He would get letters from people who found his address. He was once stopped in a parking garage by a man who berated him and said the shooting never happened. "You are taught when you are young that you ignore bullies and eventually they will leave you alone," Parker said. "But as time went on and my other girls were getting older, I realized they weren't stopping and some of this was getting worse and getting more personal." Parker is now part of a lawsuit against Jones, has testified before Congress, and pushed for changes on social media platforms such as YouTube, which announced this month it will prohibit videos that deny the Sandy Hook shooting and other well-documented events. How interesting that they put this in quotes, which implies a sort of dubious character to the phrase well-documented events. Like, what exactly is a well-documented event? Is it something that is on Wikipedia that would be assumed to be a well-documented official narrative event, right? It wasn't until the lawsuits and until it became a mainstream news story that people realized they were being complicit in this and started to moderate the content, Parker said. And Parker is referring to this. YouTube says it will ban supremacist content and remove videos that deny well-documented atrocities, like the Holocaust and the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary School. I find it very interesting that they are equating Holocaust denial with the Sandy Hook hoaxer crowd. That is fascinating. Because, of course, there are actual laws in many European countries. I think the number is up to 16. It's like 16 countries in Europe and Israel where there are laws against Holocaust denial, where you are literally put in jail if you are found to have questioned the Holocaust narrative in any way. And it really raises problematic questions. The official narrative, of course, is that, well, this took place in Europe, so we're going to put this law on the books so that no one can deny this historical event because it's such a pivotal, huge thing that took place in European history. Yeah, they're going to say that, but the idea in and of itself that you can actually jail someone for a simple thought, for simply saying, well, I would like to look into the evidence of this event, given the well-established track record of the media lying to us. Well, given that track record, we would just like to look into this a little more deeply than just saying, oh, it happened the way that you guys say it happened. And there is no other event, though some countries do have laws against genocide denial, there is no other event like this where you are not allowed to question its veracity or any part of it without being put in jail. I mean, that is extreme. And so you have to say, well, what are they hiding if this is the case? Why are you making a law like this unless there are some things that you really don't want people to be able to talk about? And so it's so interesting that they are in the context of this censorship theater. And if you don't know what I'm referring to this video I did, The Art of Propaganda YouTube Censorship Theater. I would really recommend you check out this video if you haven't already to get an idea about what I'm talking about here without me having to go into it again and repeat myself. But this is what I'm discussing here is an extension of that. This is sort of the next wave of what I have been discussing over the years in a few videos here and there. And so now they're actually going to the extent of equating denial, quote unquote, of the Sandy Hook school shooting with events like the Holocaust. And they're going to the extent now of having YouTube ban any sort of discussion or videos that focus on the legitimacy of the Sandy Hook narrative. It's indeed getting to the same point where you can't question any aspect of it. Indeed, they won't even let you be on the platform if you do this. And so it raises the same question, well, what are they trying to hide? And again, it's the official narrative in a similar way that I was just going over where they say, oh, well, we're being harassed. We have to deal with these crazy, quote-unquote, people on the internet, and indeed those crazy people are often controlled opposition, and I'll get to an example of that a little further on here, but as the article continues here, the move comes as the video service owned by Google faces increasing scrutiny for hosting extreme and divisive content. Again, this raises the question, well, in whose view is the content extreme and divisive? Who is making these decisions? In a blog post Wednesday, YouTube said it was prohibiting videos alleging that a group is superior in order to justify discrimination, segregation, or exclusion based on qualities like age, gender, race, caste, religion, sexual orientation, or veteran status. YouTube's ban on supremacist content comes a few months after Facebook said it was banning white nationalist content from its platform. That ban came 2 weeks after the suspect in the terror attack at 2 New Zealand mosques streamed part of the massacre live on the platform. A manifesto allegedly written by the suspect revealed white nationalist views. Now, this was another interesting event that took place, the one in Christchurch. What was so fascinating about it was that the media has no issues showing graphic, disturbing content. The local news is filled with it every day and every night. It's 24/7 graphic, bleeds it leads commentary and video and footage and everything that goes along with that. But yeah, they were doing the same thing in New Zealand where they were actually jailing people for reposting the video. And hopefully now we're at a point where I don't have to connect every single dot and show you how all of these events are related and how they are all coordinated to reinforce each other as a part of a larger narrative that is designed to regulate eventually what can and cannot be posted on YouTube or any other social media apparatus. Or that doesn't make sense. Any other social media website or platform that's a part of the larger apparatus known as the internet would be a better way to say it. Like I said, my brain not quite functioning 100%, but like I said before, I'm gonna try to do this anyway. Let's see. Lenny Posner, the father of a Sandy Hook victim who established the Honor Network, which monitors the spread of false information online, told CNN Business that it is impossible to calculate the damage done by videos denying the massacre took place. But he added, "We thank YouTube for taking the lead in enacting policy changes that we have been recommending for the past half-decade." An attorney representing 10 of the families who lost relatives in the Sandy Hook massacre said on Wednesday that he welcomed YouTube's decision to remove videos denying the shooting. However, he said it was too late to undo the harm that has been caused to them by conspiracy theories circulating on the platform over the last several years. And the reason I brought up this video and the ones I've done in the past is because what this person is referring to here is actual controlled opposition on YouTube and the internet in general that was designed to be pointed at by the mainstream media sources as the example for what is going on with, or as it relates to the discussion of the veracity of these events as described by the mainstream media itself. And as a result, it facilitates censorship. It facilitates their ability to actually say, see, look at what these people are doing. We really have to rein in what's going on. And then at the same time, it emboldens the followers of those who are watching the quote-unquote conspiracy YouTubers because they believe that they're being cracked down on, that they're being censored. Last August, YouTube and other social media platforms banned the conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. Jones had previously pushed false conspiracy theories about the Sandy Hook school shooting. He's being sued by the families of the victims for defamation. And it'll be really interesting to see the actual outcome of these legal proceedings and what the specific rulings are, because in a defamation lawsuit, truth is a defense. So I'll be interested to see how they navigate this. Obviously, my prediction will be that they will produce a result where the actual merits of the events themselves will never be investigated, to the point where it will never be ruled upon whether or not truth was a defense, if you understand what I'm saying. YouTube has long faced criticism for allowing misinformation. Interesting language here. Who have they long faced criticism from? Is it any of us? No. It's just this thing called the media, right? This is how they do it. This is how they phrase their language. YouTube has long faced criticism for allowing misinformation. Well, it's their own apparatus that is the only thing that has levied this criticism. There are no real people in the sense of ordinary people that are perpetuating this criticism. They're only repeating what they hear because this is how we are designed to function. YouTube has long faced criticism for allowing misinformation. And of course, then they put the long in there, like this is something that's been going on for such a long time and it just really needs to be taken care of. Have we not reached the breaking point? This is always the narrative that is put out there after these events take place. YouTube has long faced criticism for allowing misinformation, conspiracy theories, and extremist views to spread on its platform and for recommending such content to users. It's been shown that people who visited the site to watch videos on innocuous subjects or to see mainstream news have been given recommendations pushing them toward extreme content. And there you go, right? That is the entire narrative in a nutshell. We can't have these quote-unquote normal people being recommended this extreme content. No, that would be terrible. We need them to know the real truth about what's going on, and that is on places like CNN, right? I mean, I don't need to explain that to you. But all of this is so very interesting in the context of Alex Jones, who came out and said that he blames Psychosis for his Sandy Hook conspiracies. He now admits the shooting massacre was not a hoax. I mean, this just sums up the entire thing, you know. Of course, the character that they created to be the representation of what a conspiracy theorist is would eventually double back on what he originally said and say that it was psychosis that led him into this belief, because this is everything that the media has always used to deconstruct, quote unquote, conspiracy theories. They've always used this undercurrent of mental illness and schizophrenia and paranoia to point to as the reason for a quote-unquote conspiracy theory. So this is the perfect representation of why they would create the Alex Jones character and why he would engage in all the behavior that he engaged in. It all culminated in this. This is the crescendo of the symphony. Alex Jones blames Psychosis for his Sandy Hook conspiracies. I mean, it's perfection. And then you gotta love the picture they chose of him, right? You know, putting his hand on his head in that sort of headache pose that, oh, I made a mistake, right? Imprinting this sort of feeling into what they were talking about here. Notorious conspiracy theorist Alex Jones claims a form of psychosis caused him to believe that the Sandy Hook massacre was staged. For years, Jones, the founder of InfoWars, peddled a conspiracy theory about the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School, where a shooter killed 20 children and 6 adults in 2012. Jones has repeatedly claimed the massacre was a giant hoax carried out by crisis actors in a broad scheme to trample on Second Amendment rights. Now, wow, that is a packed paragraph. I mean, I could spend 20 minutes deconstructing this. First, the word peddled. Just the juvenile nature of the word peddled in the context of the conspiracy theory. Jones has repeatedly claimed the massacre was a giant hoax, in quotes, carried out by crisis actors, in quotes. So here we have the idea of hoaxes and crisis actors being associated with Alex Jones and the denial of the Sandy Hook shooting. And then finally, they further associate that with the often referred to scheme to trample on Second Amendment rights. Obviously, these events are much deeper than just the gun right issue, but they always attach that to any discussion of quote-unquote hoaxes or crisis actors because that lumps the discussion into the far-right narrative. It places it within the traditional political discourse, and by placing it in that traditional political discourse, that enables the media to structure the debate in a way that is closer to the consensus norm. It enables it to structure the debate in a way where it can surround it with the traditional negativity that surrounds political discourse. So no one is viewing the subject from a bird's eye view outside of that paradigm. They're always trying to pull you back into the traditional paradigm. In a video released Friday, Jones acknowledged in a sworn deposition stemming from a lawsuit filed by the families of Sandy Hook victims that the school shooting was in fact real. Jones blamed the trauma of the media and the corporations lying so much for triggering his extreme distrust in news and information. And I myself have almost had like a form of psychosis back in the past where I basically thought everything was staged, even though I've now learned a lot of times things aren't staged. So you see here how the narrative has been so deftly taken from the idea of, well, what if the media is lying about almost every event that we are given in the news? What if the majority of what we see in the quote-unquote news is fake? What if that's happening? Well, Alex Jones was talking about that, and then, first of all, that is discredited just because he was bringing up the idea. But second, now he says that he was thinking that, but it was actually a form of psychosis, and now he's come out of that. You see, so they've taken it from a possibility, and through their agent, they have now put it in this context of mental illness, a contextualization of psychosis. So I think as a pundit, someone giving an opinion that, you know, my opinions have been wrong, but they were never wrong consciously to hurt people. So he's deflecting blame and saying, look, I really thought this was happening, but it was a form of psychosis due to the fact that the media lies all the time. And then I just eventually came to this conclusion that everything was fake, and so I called Sandy Hook a totally staged event. I just wanted to end this on making reference to controlled opposition, and I just want to give you an example of what I'm talking about. I said that weird. I'm talking about... anyway. As it relates to the Sandy Hook shooting in particular, and that's going back to this video that came out from Vice last year, or more than a year ago now, the rise of the crisis actor conspiracy movement. Now, I find it interesting that this is their Hysteria series, but I just want to play something for you to illustrate the point that I'm making here.
Have been spreading.
Let's go show them the sign that they scratched out our name, because I got a bigger marker this time.
Hey.
Now, just to give you background, this is a quote-unquote conspiracy theorist, a quote-unquote truther known as Sidethorn, and he, quote-unquote, is questioning a lot of these events as being fake, as it were, in the same way that Alex Jones was referring to Sandy Hook. And so this was a particular specific example of a shooting that he was saying is not real in any way, shape, or form. And this is him going to the actual church where it supposedly happened during a Vice documentary. Now, I want you to pay close attention to this scene, and I'll break it down, but just really pay attention to what transpires here. Because this is supposedly an organic scene that played out during him being filmed doing this.
Tone it down.
Now, the door is open, and you'll see when this guy gets out of the car, this is the alleged pastor of the church where this shooting allegedly took place. Now, Robert Ussery, Sidethorn, he turns his head here. Let me go back to it and show it again.
Ideas have been spreading.
Let's go show them the sign that they scratched out our name, because I got a bigger marker this time.
Hey. Tone it down.
Right there, he turns his head because he sees that the cameraman is behind them, and it's not going to be a good shot of what is to come. So watch what he does.
Yeah,
he backs out of the scene and he says, oh, I'm going to show you this. And right as he backs out of the scene, watch what the camera frame does and watch what the guy in the car does. As soon as Sidethorn backs up, you'll see the camera pan out and you see him get out of the car because this was the cue for the scene to take place.
Weird.
Hey.
Camera pans out, she says hey, he says hey, and then they have this scripted exchange here.
Hey, well, look at this, guys. Hey, there's Mr. Palmer. Are you working on electric?
As if he would not have known that when they were right next to the car and he's sitting here and they're right by it. Like, of course they would know that already. And indeed, this is probably why he said tone it down, right? But you can see how he backs out of the scene. He gets out of the car right as he backs out.
Look at this, guys. Hey,
And then he pretends like this is, oh, look, this is an organic thing.
Yeah, I've been waiting on this day. So, hey, come on, guys. Come on, guys. Come on.
And then he brings the camera back in. This is what I'm saying when I'm referring to controlled opposition. And this is one of the quote-unquote truthers that the mainstream media points to, like they point at Alex Jones, who suffers from psychosis. And of course, this character is now in jail because he was a felon and he got caught with a gun and violated his parole or whatever statute is in place preventing felons from possessing firearms. And he violated that and he's in jail. So he again serves as a prime example that can be pointed to of what a conspiracy theory is. But I hope you can see from this little scene how none of this was organic. This was a scripted scene that they planned from the get-go. And of course that means that the pastor was in on it too. And that raises some serious doubt about what every party is saying about the shooting, whether they're saying it was real or whether they're saying it was completely fabricated and scripted and fake. And this is my whole point, what I was getting to just a second ago about how it doesn't matter anymore what actually happened. Doesn't matter what the evidence is. You either sit here and say, oh, well, yeah, the media lies and I'm with this side, or, oh, you guys are just crazy, mean conspiracy theorists because this guy, in the scripted way that they have it set up, cusses out the pastor. And then you can see in the comment section people being like, oh, I can't believe that mean conspiracy theorists would cuss out the pastor like that. But that's what I mean. They set it up so that the narrative is constructed from both sides in the same way that the political paradigm proliferates the mainstream media and all the politics, cable news shows, and how they get everyone agitated and mad at each other, in addition to all the subliminal, subconscious propaganda that they're throwing at you that your conscious mind doesn't perceive through the television and everything that's going on there. That's a whole deeper subject that is not necessary to get into right now. But this is just a perfect example of what I'm talking about. And, you know, I had another video up where I showed how in a recording, this character, if it's even a real person, I don't know. But as a part of the backstory of the character, they said that he was involved as an extra in Hollywood on an actual TV show. And this is how he said he got the eyes to see crisis actors, quote unquote. So this is someone who was involved in Hollywood who then just all of a sudden coincidentally becomes this truther that is a part of this whole narrative that Vice eventually does a documentary on, which is totally designed to discredit the entire idea of the media staging an event such that it wasn't real in the first place. And this just really, really puts it out there. I'm going to play it one more time, and I'll try not to talk over it, just so you can
Down.
get the idea.
Yeah, go ahead.
He even says, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I mean, he literally gives the cue for the guy to come out of the car. I know I said I wasn't going to talk, but I forgot to mention that one. So he even says, yeah, go ahead.
We're going to show you where we're...
Hey.
Oh, we're going to show you. And then, you see, that's his way of pretending like it was going to be something else. She says, hey, as he says, he comes out of the car after he says, yeah, go ahead. The cameraman pans out, and then...
Hey, well, look at this, guy.
The scene progresses, and they have this whole scripted WWF beef between each other. You know, they might as well start giving each other pile drives after they're arguing with each other. I mean, that's how real it is. So, yeah, I just wanted to point that out. I had this in the back of my mind for a while, and I never got around to making a video about it last year, but I just wanted to tack that on to this whole discussion about the latest from what the Newtown parents are allegedly doing in all these lawsuits against Alex Jones. And of course, we can deduce that these are most likely not legitimate lawsuits that are taking place, not in the sense that there aren't real people involved and official documentation, but just in the sense of the theater aspect of it, because of course these lawsuits are used in the same way as things that can be pointed to justify censorship and justify a change in guidelines on sites like YouTube, because it's representative of harassment. And that's the theme that is shown through all of these articles. And so just in the context of that and the latest changes that YouTube made to its guidelines and the whole extension of what I was talking about in the past video about the censorship theater and how all of this was planned from the very beginning, you know, what I even said in the description of that video, much like how the Twin Towers were built to be destroyed, an overwhelming majority of the channels now claiming to be censored striked off of YouTube for exposing the quote-unquote truth about crisis actors and hoaxes were designed from their very inception to help eventually bring the censorship into fruition. And simultaneously, this censorship ostensibly provides these channels with a renewed veneer of credibility. And indeed, this is the exact same thing that Alex Jones is doing with this whole narrative, where the mainstream media can say, oh, look, he even admits he was suffering from a form of psychosis. And then in his own shows, Alex Jones can say things like, well, they put child porn in my computer during the discovery process, and they're out to get me, and they're censoring me. They kicked me off YouTube. They're kicking me off all these platforms. They're censoring free speech. You know, he can take that angle, and that emboldens his followers, and the narrative that the mainstream media can point to provides that sigh of relief for the people that kind of don't want to get into all this. They just have that natural resistance, and they can say, oh yeah, see, it's just psychosis, what all these conspiracy theorists are talking about on the internet. Don't worry about any of that. I'm just going to go back to my regular life and turn off the computer. Who cares? You know, it's just the whole thing. I thought this was some interesting stuff to get into. And yeah, that's all I got for now. I will leave it there.